Now that we've created the data vault and the business data vault constructs, we're going to go ahead and actually look at the data mart process. So the first thing you need to do to build the data mart is you need to create the views that you need to load the data mart, and all of those views, the code for the views, are attached in the documentation. But let's have a quick look at just how would you build a view for a fact in a dimension table. So let's look at the fact table. It's probably the more complex one of the lot. The first thing you need to do is, again, you decide with where you're going to start. So in this case, I'm going to start with the point in time table. So you always start in your form clause with your primary point in time table. Now I could have used the sales order line here first, but I'm going to start with the sales order. You join the point in time table to the bridge table on the sort of surrogate key, and then you would join the point in time table to its satellite. Okay, then you would join the rest of the point in time tables to the bridge, and so forth and so down. So here I'm joining the customer, the address, and the address again for the ship to address and build to address. And the reason we're joining these point in time tables is because we need to get the business keys back for those. So we need these business keys back from the point in time tables to be able to hook them up to the dimensions. But that is just a pattern here. Feel free to look at it. We cover this off in our more advanced training sessions here. So what I've done here is I've created the views for the sales order, the customer, the address, and the product here. So once we've created all these views, we run them into our data vault, and we'll have the views sitting over here in our data vault. We will have all of the views. So if I refresh this, I've run them in here, and now what I need to do is actually get that metadata into BimlFlex. And to do that, I'll head over to the BimlFlex app, and I'll go to the projects, and I'll select the data mart project here because I'm going to load data from the data vault into the data mart. Going to hit the import metadata button, and I have split this up into two separate schemas here. So I actually want everything. I want all of these views from my DBO schema, and I'm going to unselect these two columns here. They're not really relevant, but we're going to unselect those. And if you've created your views where the first column in the view is also the key of the view, remember when we import views, we do not have access to all the primary keys because views just obviously don't have primary keys and foreign keys and references. But if we have that, what we can do is if you've put your key in the first column, you can select this first column button here and hit import metadata. This is now going to bring all of the view metadata into BimlFlex. So let's have a look at what they look like. So again, if we go to the data mart project here, we'll see now that we have these views, and if I look at the views like the customer view here, you'll see that on the first column I've got the primary key, integration key, and the rest of the columns will all be there. Again, if we look at things like, sorry, I'll go back to the project here, look at that, and then if you look at the sales order, the one thing you probably want to know or do is you want to give these column names the right names for your dimensions on your facts. So spend a little bit of time working in your views and your facts here to make sure that the columns that's returned as metadata into BimlFlex is actually what you want it to be. So now let's go ahead here and actually look at building out some facts and dimensions. So we're going to normally start off, it's probably best to start off with a dimension. So the first one I'm going to do is start off with the very top one here, the address. Hit the clone button here, and then type in this target schema here of dim. So I'm going to put my dimensions in a schema called dim. I'm going to take it out of there, change the target object type here to dimension, and then I want to add an identity column here of address key. So target schema, address, dimension, and then just hit save. So I'll go back to the projects, and what you'll need to do here is go there, and if you may need to go ahead here and just reload, hit reload and get your dimension back in here. So now I've put my dim address there. Okay, the next thing you also see here is if I go back to address, you'll see if I just go to any one of these columns, you'll see that it's got the target table and target column. So that the clone button there, what it does is it takes the metadata of the object that you are cloning, creates a target object, and creates mappings between the source and the target. So what we now effectively, just by clicking that clone button, we have now created the lineage to load that view and put it into the dimension. So let me go ahead and just very quickly do the rest of them. I'm going to go ahead here and go to customer, and I'm going to clone the same. I'm going to go through the same process here of just going dim, taking that out, changing this to dimension, and identity column and leave that as it is, hit save, and then again the same with project, clone, go ahead and do dim, go project here, and dimension, add identity, product, and it. Good. Now that I've created my 3 dimensions, I want to also create my fact table. Again, we're going to do a little bit more things here. So I'm going to go ahead on the fact table and hit clone. And I'm going to put this in a fact schema and take this away and go fact. And I'm not going to add an identity column. You can if you want, but identity columns on fact tables doesn't really mean a lot, but so you can add one if you want, add one. I'm not going to do one in the walkthrough. Hit save, and what this is going to do is create the fact table for me. So what I'm going to do now is actually go and hit the refresh metadata button to, if I go to project here, I will now have my dimensions and facts here, and I'll have my tables here, and the lineage will be already inputted for me. The next thing that I want to do is obviously create the relationships between the fact, the product, and the address. So there has to be a relationship where I need to create the star schema. So the easiest way to do that is to go ahead here and go into my star schema here, and I'm going to go and grab my data mart, and I'm going to grab all of them over here. I'm going to grab all of them over here, and I'm actually going to go and show my columns because I'm going to do some modeling here. I'll hit the refresh button here, and just for the sake of actually making it look like a star schema, I'll move things around a little bit here. So now what we need to do is we need to connect the fact up to the customer address twice actually, and the product here. Now as you can see here in the fact sales order, I have the customer BK. So this customer business key, or the key from the customer, needs to be connected to the dimension here. And then so what we're going to do is I'm going to go and add a reference here. Now if I add a reference between the fact sales order and the customer, it comes up with a dialog, and what this dialog is telling you is that the customer business key is going to be mapped to the customer key, and then it's going to rename the source column to customer key. So effectively what it needs to do is it needs to change the data type of this to the customer key, because we want the surrogate key in the fact, but behind the scenes BimlFlex have retained the metadata and the knowledge to know that actually I'm getting a business key that needs to look up a surrogate key and return the surrogate key to the fact. So I'll do exactly the same here for the product BK, add a reference between this and that, and it's going to say the same thing. Then the build to address, reference between this and address, say okay. And as you see here, as I've added this reference here, it calls this one address key here. I actually want to go and edit this column and rename this to my build to address key, and we will add make it a little bit more intuitive later on, but for now let's rename that to build to address key. And then I'll do this, add another reference here where I'll drop that in there, say okay, it's going to rename this to address key, and again I'll just edit this column here and call this ship to address key. Okay, fantastic. So that is all we needed to do to build a very basic data vault, a data mart from our data vault. However, we want to maybe go and do a couple more things here. So I'm going to go ahead over, let's just say these are all now built based on type 1 dimensions, but let's just have a look at our customer dimension and make some of these attributes type 2. So let's head back over here, and I can do it from here, straight from here. So I can go in here, and actually what I'll do here is, let's just say my first name, middle name, last name, and suffix, and let's just say name style. Those are all type 1, you know. I don't want to track history on it. But let's just say my company name, salesperson, email address, and phone. Those could change. So what I will do here is go to the bulk edit option here and say I want to change all of those type 1s to type 2. So now what I have is I have a table here. Let me head over here and just show you the result of that. If I look at my customer dim, I have a table now here that will have, oh, I need to refresh my metadata. Okay, so what I'll now have is I'll have a table here that will have type 1 attributes and type 2 attributes, and this is some referred to as a type 6 attribute. I could have made all of these type 2 attributes, which will be a pure type 2 dimension, and if all of these attributes are type 1, it'll be a type 1 dimension. And that is how you would bring in views from a staging layer or from a data vault and bring that into BimlFlex and create your data mart layer. So now that we've created our data mart layer, or the metadata for our data mart layer, let's head back over again to Biml Studio here and go and refresh our metadata. So again, I'm going to do a couple of steps here. It's going to be manual, but as I said, with continuous integration and deployment, everything that I'm going to do here and right now through manual steps is going to can be automated. So with the data mart, we will have the dimensions and facts sitting over here. We'll also have the same staging tables here. Leave this as default, but there is options in BimlFlex to put this into their own separate database or change the naming convention and naming pattern here. But for now, let's leave it as it is. And what we'll also see down the bottom here is we'll have the point in time table, bridge table batches that we've created. And now we will have a data mart batch, and we will also have the SSIS packages for the data mart loads. Again, you can go and add extension points in these, but for the walkthrough, that's all it is. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go and, again, just for the walkthrough, I'm just going to go ahead and actually go and grab the table create script again, just to get the tables. Grab that and push that into Management Studio here. And this is just for me to test my build. Okay, and I'm going to head back into Kimball Studio and hit the build button, which means is I'm now going to build everything that I need end to end for my source to staging. I've got my data vault projects there. I've got my point in time tables. I've got my bridge tables, and now I'll have my dimensions and my facts will be built out for me now too. All right, so I've built it and I've got an error. Now this could, when you're working with BimlFlex, you will still get build errors, right? So what I've realized here is that in our sample metadata, we've not set one of the settings there. So let's go over and fix this. So this is saying to me that this row, flex row is inferred, is not in there, and this is one of our configuration settings. So let me go and show you just a little bit about those configuration settings here. So I'll head back into BimlFlex, go to configurations. And how configurations work is effectively we have a set of standard configurations that we need to use the BimlFlex, and these are the keys. However, and it has a configuration value here. These names you can change. So the defaults here is just so they are unique. But what it is complaining about is this row is inferred, and you can actually use them and set them up. So what we should have done here is set this one here is up to derived and save this. And now go ahead and build it. So I'll head back into BimlFlex here and just go and create the objects again. So I'll go back into Biml Studio, sorry. So I'll go back into Biml Studio here, refresh the metadata, and it's pulling the metadata back in. And then what I will do is I'll go to generate scripts, create table scripts here. So just to get the latest with that row is inferred in, copy that and go and paste that into Management Studio again, go through the same process and run that. So I actually wanted to show you that error, and now what I'll do is I'll head back into Kimball Studio again, and I'll go and build it, and hopefully this time we won't get any errors. All right, so the build is now completed, and hopefully that's for you too. And then what we'll now do is we'll head back over to Visual Studio, and I'll just go ignore all here, and I'll go no to all there. And what we'll now do is I'll open up and just make sure that we have the data mart project. Again, I'll choose the data mart project here, open that up, say no there, and this will load the data mart project. Okay, so now that we have this data mart project here, it's got a batch and all the packages. I'm just going to briefly show you, feel free to look through around there, but I'll show you just briefly a couple of things. I'll open up the customer one here, because remember we've defined this to be a type 6 or type 1 and type 2. If I go into this package here, you'll see down the bottom here, it actually has quite a lot of complex, a lot of sort of stuff here to handle type 1 changes, type 2 changes, inserts, and also obviously unaffected rows, and do all the row counting. If I look at just the address dimension, which is just a type 1 dimension, you'll see that it's a lot simpler pattern here and only has the type 1 dimension here, and will allow you the ability to inject any customizations logic that you need. So that really just gets us to the end of the walkthrough. You've now been able to build all the way from source to staging, with persistent staging. You've got your data vault layer, you've got your business data vault layer there, and you have your data mart layer.